Howdy, y'all. So darn. This is harder than I thought it would be. Very, very, very difficult to talk to nobody. It's like pretty much impossible for me. Like I cannot possibly do it. Like, how am I supposed to do this? But anyways, I guess I'll have to try. I guess. um. So yeah. Um. So maybe I could talk about what it takes to make a good story. So, Lord of the Rings is a good story, and it's like one of my favorite stories. Though I like reading the Chronicles of Narnia more because it seems to me like the Chronicles of Narnia is just written in like is way more filled with things, like sort of like one thing after another, and that's pretty good. But the Lord of the Rings is it also has that kind of thing, but it's a lot like it feels a lot more like a real place. I think the only reason that Narnia feels like a real place is because it has the real world inside of it. If it didn't have the real world inside of it, then all semblance of realism would be gone. Now those are pretty much the only fantasy books I've ever read, except I've also read some of the Earthsea trilogy. Like, I don't know if it's a trilogy, but Earthsea. And there's something kind of fake about that world. Like, it doesn't feel very real. It feels empty. Like, it doesn't feel like it has a terrible amount of history. Now, in my book, I'm gonna have to overcome that. Like, I'm gonna try to make it so it's very interesting, like Chronicles of Narnia. The world is very history filled, like Lord of the Rings. Now, what I like about the Earthsea trilogy, not trilogy, but like Earthsea, is that um let's see, what is good about Earthsea? Um hmm. Like it's like the story, like how it's very, very focused on like the characters conquering themselves, which I think is a very good thing that doesn't seem like Lord of the Rings and Narnia has quite as much as Earthsea, which is definitely something that I want to have inside my stories. Like it's very like centered on what is very important to humans, if you know what I mean. Let me think if there's like other stories. Like I read Harry Potter's like Harry Potter is not like let me say like and it's like in Harry Potter what I think is good at Harry Potter is not necessarily the characters, not not necessarily how deep the world is, though that's the thing about Harry Potter is it does have like a certain amount of history to a point that it does feel like it's like in a real place, like you're actually there, like there. I think part of that is leaving certain things unexplained, like sort of giving little bits of information about things, but it seems like there's a real whole story behind everything. But then the other thing that Harry Potter has is that it is every single chapter on its own is fun to read. Like every single chapter on its own is like a small book, which is something that I'll have to focus on in the story that I make. Like a you know, each chapter has something new that's interesting inside of it. And it's also very short to read. So it's very easy to read. Unlike Lord of the Rings, which is not as easy to read, is it? But Lord of the Rings is pretty easy to read. And then I don't think I've really read that many other things other than those things. Oh yes, I did read The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz. Well, first of all, there's some problems with it. It doesn't feel like it's in a real place. Like the place doesn't have any history. Everything's just there as if it suddenly appeared there like in the last few years or something. But what it does have is like the Chronicles of Narnia, it has very interesting things very rapidly. So it keeps you interested while you're reading it. I also kind of like its characters, how it goes very extreme on its characters, and like very like based on very simple ideas. Takes very simple ideas and turns them into more complex things. That's kind of what Chronicles of Narnia does, and I like that about the Chronicles of Narnia. So yeah, so the perfect book, I guess, like perfect fantasy novel, will have a story that's very based on what's important to us, has very extreme, like characters are based on very simple things that guide them. Every chapter must be a good book in its own right. That's like if you find an uninteresting chapter, find something to make it interesting. Like find something that can, if like the thing is focusing on is not good, then make it focus on something that is interesting. But you can still have the other thing happen inside this chapter, so that it keeps things interesting. Like inside Harry Potter, like it feels like it's like doing very unimportant things, like some sort of event that's happening or something, but the real main things that drive the story are happening behind that thing that's happening. They the author just sort of making up. Chronicles of Narnia doesn't exactly. Well, the Chronicles of Narnia does a little bit, but not as well as Harry Potter does it. Harry Potter is very focused on that. The Chronicles of Narnia is very good. But yeah, have that, and then also what was the other thing? I'm forgetting. Oh no. I'm saying too much. Oops. Make each chapter very interesting. Make everything very like fast, like a lot of information in a small space. But like Chronicles of Narnia, like that's how I'm going to do it, I think. because Chronicles of Narnia has a perfect mix of that. Like Lord of the Rings is good how long it is, but I don't think that's like it's better if you have more of Chronicles of Narnia than like having those all like how long each chapter is in Lord of the Rings. Like, you know, Chronicles of Narnia packs a lot in this small space. They've had a Chronicles of Narnia that was as long as Lord of the Rings. That would be good. You know? Which makes you think that Harry Potter is obviously missing something that Chronicles of Narnia has a lot. And that is that Chronicles of Narnia has very strong morals inside of it. Well, Harry Potter does not have strong morals. Harry Potter feels a lot more like you're not reading something is worthwhile, as if you're reading the Chronicles of Narnia. And that's a very important thing, especially since Harry Potter is about witchcraft and stuff. While it's not intrinsically evil, and like witchcraft is intrinsically evil, but while it's not necessarily evil in Harry Potter, it's not a very good thing that it's about witches and stuff. So that's sort of a downfall of that book series. If it wasn't about that stuff, it would be a lot better. Like if you found some way to make a lot of interesting stuff happen inside of the book that wasn't like that. Now I noticed something I learned is that a very important thing in stories is to have subtlety. And I'm gonna look at all those 5 books, and see which ones have the most subtlety, and see if that makes them the better story. And like I feel like Harry Potter does actually have a lot of subtlety inside of it. And Lord of the Rings don't really like yeah, actually the Lord of the Rings does actually have subtlety inside of it, like you know, it doesn't explicitly say the character's motives, or what's driving characters outright in the text, and doesn't exactly explicitly say things outright. Like it explains things in a very realistic way instead of outright showing everything. Like for instance, Frodo getting wiser, it sort of shows it inside of a dialogue and what happens inside the book, and all that stuff. Inside of the Chronicles of Narnia, oh, I need to stop saying it. Inside of the Chronicles of Narnia, it is different. It seems to me like the characters' motives are quite out in the open, which makes me think it does not have very much subtlety. But it's still a good book, though. Does that mean that you don't need subtlety inside of a book, or what? Let me think. Oh, I should think out loud. Trying to think of a situation in the book, thinking through all the stuff that happens in the book, okay, so actually, they actually may have a little bit of subtlety, actually, now that I think about it. Like, for instance, I think, actually, now that I think about it, I think it should be pretty easy to do subtlety, like, just not, like, write super descriptively of, like, maybe the main character, but, like, other characters write descriptively, so, like, for instance, when Tom the Stefan comes and, uh, takes Lucy to kidnap her for the queen, it wasn't, like, outright saying, well, okay, now that I think about it, like, subtlety is, like, letting the reader figure out things on their own. And actually, yes, that's true. Yes. That's what subtlety is. Subtlety is letting the reader figure out things on their own. And that is certainly done inside of Lord of the Rings. Because there are a lot of things that, like, the reader, like, thinks on their own, like, and stuff, like, sort of, like, a lot of things are left unexplained. That's what it is. And subtlety is, like, these things unexplained, but things that the reader can figure out. So, and now think about it, I think that could be done in many different ways. Um, like inside of a Chronicles of Narnia, I guess maybe what it is that, like, what's going to happen next in the story, like, there are a lot of very interesting things that are happening inside the book that you're wondering what's going to happen next to the characters and what's going to happen next to everyone inside the book, and, like, when is this going to happen and stuff like that. Inside of Earthsea, I feel like they don't do the best job at that. It feels like there isn't enough continuity inside of it for you to be, like, wondering what's going to happen next in the book, because they're, like, the thing is that in Cross Narnia there are unfinished things left, but, like, in Earthsea, in Earthsea, it doesn't really feel like they're, like, not nearly as much as other books. So I think it's a very important thing to leave things important in the story unexplained. Yeah, like inside of Lord of the Rings, like in the beginning when the hobbits are leaving the Shire and stuff. It doesn't even tell you what the Black Bears are. And, like, it doesn't even, like, the full import of, like, everything is not really explained exactly. And where Gandalf is and stuff, and, like, it's very intriguing, and, like, the reader, when he's reading, is, like, wondering in his mind what's going on. I guess that's what mind needs subtlety. Need to have the reader think things in his mind about it inside of a story. And inside of Harry Potter, when you're reading Harry Potter, whoops, when you're reading Harry Potter, you're thinking constantly about what's going to happen next and stuff. Though not nearly as much, I think, as Lord of the Rings and Chronicles of Narnia. I think it is a little worse at that. But it does make each chapter intensely interesting. So, all of it to say, yeah, it seems to me like Chronicles of Narnia masters all these things so perfectly. Except for having the Chronicles of Narnia world feel like as deep as the Lord of the Rings world. I think that's the only downside. And, whoops. And now that I think about it, I think The Hobbit is written quite a bit differently than The Lord of the Rings, so we could try to take some things from The Hobbit. The Hobbit actually, I think The Hobbit is a bit worsely written than The Lord of the Rings, which makes The Lord of the Rings a lot better in a way. But The Hobbit has a lot of history inside and lore inside of it. It's very shortly written, a lot of things happening very quickly and stuff. Quickly, not not as well as maybe the Chronicles of Narnia and Harry Potter, but it has a lot. It makes the reader wonder a lot what's going to happen next because there are a lot of unexplained things inside the story, which is good. Yeah, I remember reading The Hobbit. That was pretty good. Uh, I'm doing pretty bad at this. I'm not putting my full emotion into doing this podcast. But I will learn pretty soon. I'm pretty sure. Because this is not at all how I talk to people. Not really. Like, if I'm talking to someone, I'll be a lot more passionate about the things I'm talking about, I think. But anyways, I will get there. There is another series I just realized I read, and that's The Borrowers. The Borrowers is a pretty good book series, a pretty good book series. And The Borrowers is based inside of the real world, so it does feel very real, but there's a feeling I get from reading it. It makes it not as good as the Chronicles of Narnia or something. And I think that what that is that it isn't quite as based, like, the characters aren't quite as based on, like, things that matter to humans as much as other things. Like, the story is more driven on interesting things happening and like making the stories just like interesting, like not knowing what's going on, but it's not based on like things that are important to us, like Ariadne is constantly like wanting to like talk to humans and stuff, and like feels like she's penned into by her parents and stuff like that. But like that isn't told as clearly as, for instance, inside of The Hobbit, Bilbo wanting to go in Bilbo going on an adventure and stopping being like trapped in. Like, I feel like the Ariadne thing is like a lot about adventure and being less stuck in your place. Well, I think the thing is that it just has a lot less of that kind of thing. Like, it's just it's basically, yeah, that's it. Like, the Borrowers is like based on like one character or two or three. It's like it doesn't have as many um moving, riveting character arcs. Pretty much the one that's like very good is like the Ariadne one or maybe the Spiller one. But other than that, not it's not that much to go on. Whereas like inside The Hobbit, there's Bilbo, there's Smaug, there's Thorin Oakenshield, and the Elven King. A lot of and like Barda Bowman. A lot of characters that are like developing and like have very set points of view and like things they care about inside a story. Which I think is a very important thing inside of a story, to have a lot of different dynamics, which The Borrowers doesn't have as much as other stories. But it is a pretty good book series though. And this is making me think of another book that I did actually read. Trying to remember its name. That's right. It was The Pirates of Zen or something. Pirates of Zen or something like that. Very exactly. It's a book. It's a book about a character called Braun Hodden and how he goes on an adventure to and he's out in space and he goes different places and very based on it's like science fiction. It's not really just like Star Wars or something. It's like science fiction, and it's very interesting though because unlike a lot of science fiction, which has the problem that a lot of it is based more on the science fictiony things that are happening, or it doesn't feel very based in like doesn't have a lot very much history inside the worlds, or doesn't have a lot of like things like that. I'm mostly thinking of Star Trek because Star Trek often depresses me with like how unbased it feels and something. I feel like it feels very unbased and it's sort of floating around in a nothingness. I think I think good stories have to be not feel like you're floating around in nothingness. You have to feel like you're fixed in root things. Yeah, that's it. Star Trek feels like you're constantly lost in space. But for instance, The Lord of the Rings, it has the Shire and everything, and Harry Potter has his home, but the Dursleys. It's not like it has something base below it, which Star Trek doesn't have, and I think other science fiction things. But the Pirates of Zed, it does. It has his home planet, which he lived on for a long time, and then it has very homely other planets. The other planet isn't really modern or anything; it's actually more medievally, and the way he does it, he makes it feel very much like it was lived in or something, and it feels very suspenseful, like you're constantly trying to think of what's going to happen. It's filled with a lot of action, interesting things, and every chapter is very interesting to read, and there's a lot of character development, and each character is swayed by different things, like going towards a different motive and things like that. A lot of dynamics, a lot of um, well, also a lot of good morals, like characters doing heroic things and other characters not doing heroic things, and like a lot of it's a good story. Actually, I'd say pretty much as good as Chronicles of Narnia or something like that. So which is very strange because I well, actually, now I think about it, it does have lots of medieval things inside of it. So I guess that's part of the reason why I like it, anyways. But that's part of it. And then that actually made me think I did also read a few books by Jules Verne, so I could actually talk about those. Um, Around the World in 80 Days and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And Jules Verne is a very, very, very good writer. There's one thing, though, that I think his stories fail in, that Chronicles of Narnia and the Pirates of Zen does have. And that is, um, they center maybe a little bit less on the characters than what's actually happening in the book. Because what's most important to us are the people inside the stories, and really need to have the people change and lots of interesting things happen with them, and Around the World in 8 Days and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Well, this does happen throughout the story. By the end of the story, some things happen with the characters themselves. Not as extreme and interesting as the Chronicles of Narnia and the Pirates of Zen or Earthsea. But other than that, it has extremely interesting things happen inside the books, and you're constantly wondering what's going to happen next. And each chapter is very, very fun to read because very different things happen inside, and lots of adventures and stuff like that. And yeah, well, there you go. That's pretty much it. That's yeah. Need to really focus when you're writing a story. Need to imagine yourself reading it, and like any any shortcomings you see to it, like really imagine what you can do to change that, and then change it, because that's how you get the best story, by really focusing on the best story instead of like getting stuck in what you're already writing and just making a bad story. If you know what I mean. Like, needs to have like characters that are like, needs to have something that's rooted in. It needs to have um pretty much the best stories have um characters that represent very extremes of certain things, while the main characters aren't exactly rooted in something like that, but are like dealing with characters that are very extreme, and like something that they, or maybe it's just what I like, but that seems to be the stuff that seems to be the best to me. Okie dokie, well, there you go.